Good morning. Today we are going to read Pigza Swallowed the Key by Jack Gantos, Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is titled Gifted and Talented. Mrs. Maxey had a conference in the morning, so our class had a substitute named Miss Adams, who didn't know me from Adam. This was a good break because after the field trip, Mrs. Maxey said she and me and Mrs. Howard and Mrs. Jarzab and my mom and Nurse Holyfield were all going to have a big meeting to discuss the next step for me. I knew she wasn't talking about my ankle. That much I was sure of. But since Mrs. Maxey didn't show up, I stopped worrying about what might happen. There were other things going on right before my eyes. After Miss Adams took roll, it was announced over the loudspeaker in the classroom that all the students in the Gifted and Talented program were to be released to meet in the auditorium for a special presentation. A handful of students stood up, and I did too, and followed them right out the door. Maria was at the front of the line, and I was the last, so she didn't even see me, or she would have snitched. I knew if Mrs. Jarzab saw me, she would be upset about yesterday and probably send me down to Mrs. Howard. So instead of going into the regular auditorium door, I went around to the side door that opened to the back of the stage. I had gone in there before because when the huge velvet stage curtain was pulled open, I loved to hide between the folds on one end, and I could stand there forever wrapped up in the soft blue velvet like a caterpillar in a cocoon. So I tiptoed onto the back of the stage and slipped into one of the folds of the curtain and stood still with the dusty velvet tickling my nose. Before long, Mrs. Jarzab introduced a woman named Mrs. Cole, who had written a book on character counts, which was one of Mrs. Jarzab's favorite slogans. Then she introduced Mrs. Cole to the Gifted and Talented students and said they were a very special bunch of children. The cream of the crop, she called them. Mrs. Cole was very excited and began to speak as loud and intense as a television preacher. Special people have to do special things for others less fortunate, she declared. This is one of the great duties for people of exceptional character. In a roundabout way, she was talking to me. I knew I'd never be part of the Gifted and Talented program. That much was true. But I was one of the special people. My mom said I was special, the nurse said I was special, and I was also in special ed. So I really listened to everything she had to say, and I liked what I heard. That because we were the special kids, we had to make sure we put our energy and talent to work for the benefit of the whole world. Think of it this way, she said, as if she were telling the greatest secret ever. All of you in this room have the power to change the world for the better. You might invent something like computers, discover a cure for AIDS, and save millions of lives. Like Mother Teresa, you might devote yourself into helping people who have no one else to help them. Perhaps you could be the president and set an example of superior leadership. Or you could contribute your time and effort to build a better community. She went on and on about how it was up to the special gifted and talented kids to lead the way for others, and that if we each pledge to be a positive force in the world, then the world will be a better place for everyone. And it all starts with one person at a time, she said. So I want each of you today to accomplish something special that is an example of your peers. That character counts. Everyone clapped, but I didn't dare, so I did a sneaky clapping by blinking my eyes up and down real fast. What she said was true. Already I was thinking about something I could do during the day that would make the world a better place because of me, Joey Pigza. After the assembly, I didn't want to go back to class, so I hobbled down to the nurse to have her check on my ankle. From all that standing, it started to throb. I knew nothing big was wrong with it, but the throbbing gave me a reason to see the nurse, who was always happy to see me. I was wearing a regular shoe on one foot, and I had the rabbit slipper from Mrs. Howard on the one that was twisted. The nurse looked at my ankle, then squeezed it and flipped it back and forth. "This is nothing," she said, and nicked my chin with her fist. Swallowing the key was worse. "I could never swallow my ankle," I said as a joke. "Lord, I hope not," she said, and laughed. I don't think nature would take its course. Then she took an ace bandage out of a metal cabinet and wrapped the ankle up for me tight so that it felt better. "You can keep the bandage," she said, "as long as you use it." "Okay," I said. I was thinking of using it to wrap myself up like a mummy for Halloween. "Do you have any more?" "I have some old ones," she said, "but first let's get your ankle healed before we mummify you. Okay?" "Okay," I agreed. I loved being agreeable. I loved the nurse, and I thought she did a lot of special things, so I told her in a whisper I snuck to the gifted and talented speech. "And Mrs. Cole told us to do one really good thing today," I said to her. "I think that's an excellent idea," Mrs. Holyfield whispered back. "So what do you have in mind?" "I'm still thinking about it," I said, "but it's coming." "Well, keep working at it," she said. "I am," I replied, and stood up. As long as I walked in straight lines and didn't twist my foot right or left, then it didn't hurt so much. "See you later," she said. After lunch, I returned to the classroom instead of going out to recess. I wanted to work on my new idea to change the world, even though I could feel my meds wearing down like they do every time I eat something. Mrs. Maxey was back and sitting at her desk filling out some papers. "Hi," I said. "Did you have a nice morning?" "Yes, I did," she replied, and then asked, "How's your ankle?" "Better." "Did you notice anything extra in your desk drawer?" I asked. "I did," she said, and smiled at me. I lifted my chin and smiled right back at her. It seems some secret admirer of mine left me a slice of cinnamon apple in my drawer. "Can you guess who that nice kid might be?" I asked. "I bet it's the kid who's going to have the best behavior all afternoon," she said. "I bet it is too," I replied. "You know, we still have to have that talk," she said, still smiling. "You really lost it yesterday." "Yeah, but I've changed already. I sneaked out and went to the Gifted and Talented Assembly, and now I'm ready to do something great for the whole world." "Sneaking out doesn't lead me to believe that you've changed at all," she replied. "Yeah, but I only broke a little rule," I replied, "and now I can do something great for the world." "Really?" she asked. "What do you have in mind?" "I'm going to make 1,000,000 bumper stickers for cars that say, 'Hate is not a family value.' My mom saw one at work and said she wished she had 1,000,000 of them to put on every car in the world." "That is very thoughtful," she said, "but I don't think you should stick things on people's cars." "I won't," I said. "Mom will. I better get going. I only have a few minutes before everyone comes back from recess." "Well, go to the back of the room and use the art supply," she said. "If you stay on task, I'm sure you can get 1,000,000 done on time." So I went to the back of the room and I got a thick piece of poster board. I took my time and drew wide lines across it, and between each line I printed out the bumper stickers saying in big block letters. I took a day-glow marker and outlined the word hate to grab everyone's attention. When I finished, I held up the big poster up over my head. "Mrs. Maxey, look!" I shouted. She lifted her head from her work and gave me the thumbs up. Then she gave me a little secret wink and a smile because even though I'm difficult, I'm very special and smart. Everyone says so. "Very good printing," she said. "Nicely done, Joey." "Nicely done, Joey," echoed in my mind over and over. I loved how that sounded, and I didn't want to have any other words come into my head again, ever. Just those three. Nicely done, Joey. But suddenly I remember I had to finish up fast. I got the safety scissors and began to cut the poster board into bumper sticker-sized strips. But the poster board was too thick and the scissors kept twisting over onto their side, and the harder I squeezed, the more my fingers hurt. Then the bell rang and kids started to pile in front of the playground. I wanted to finish cutting my bumper stickers, so when Mrs. Maxey got up from her desk to go stand in the hall and make sure nobody was running, I snuck up to her desk and opened the top drawer and grabbed her secret extra sharp scissors. I was racing back to the bumper stickers with the scissors in my hand when it happened. I tripped over the stupid ear of the rabbit slipper, and I sort of dove through the air with the open scissors stretched all the way out in front of me like some evil big bird's beak, when Maria Dombrowski walked sideways across my path like a safety patrol guard and said, "Slow down!" But I didn't, and my hand collided with the other side of her face and went tumbling down the aisle. I thought I was the one who was screaming because it was so loud I figured it had to be coming out of my mouth, but it wasn't me. I jumped up and didn't know what had happened at first, when, oh my God, you should have seen the blood. It was like a pipe had burst. Blood just poured onto the floor from the cut end of her nose, and she stood there shaking with her eyes wide open like she stuck her finger in the electric socket. I bent over and picked up the tip of her nose, which now looked like the tiny end of a piece of a sliced banana. Then I stood up and pressed it back in place, but the blood sprayed out in a circle like a shower nozzle. Oh, it was awful. Her mouth was wide open and no more sound came out, and I looked into her eyes and there was so much fear trapped in them. I went instantly out of my mind, worse than Maria even, worse than Mrs. Maxey when a kid ran to tell her that she came flying into the room. And I was shrieking, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry," and as I tried to pat the little nose piece back in place, like it would stick, and the blood would stop, and the cut would vanish, and I would run all the way to my poster, which was going to change the world for the better. Mrs. Maxey yanked me away from Maria, and I went spinning around like a top, screeching and hopping from desk to desk, yelling, "Sorry, sorry." Then I tried to wrestle the scissors from Mrs. Maxey, who had taken them from me because I wanted to cut my whole nose off, just to show how sorry I was and give it to Maria. But Mrs. Maxey wouldn't let me have the scissors, and she kept shouting, "Time out! Time out! Go to your corner!" But I was so nuts I couldn't tell you the difference between a corner and a circle or a square. And before long, Nurse Holyfield arrived with a mile of gauze and white tape and began to bandage the nose with ice, and oh, I was like on fire, just skipping around. And then I heard the ambulance, and then the principal came and threw her jacket over Maria's shoulders, and they raced her out of the room. Believe me, it was bad, and everyone was staring at me like I was a maniac killer. I didn't know what else to do. I sat at my desk and ripped the ears off that rabbit slipper and stuffed them in my pockets and waited for something horrible to happen. And it did. Mrs. Maxey was trying to clean up the mess and calm the class down when Mrs. Jarzab returned with blood on her jacket and pointed at me. "Joey," she said from the front of the room, "bring your things and come with me." I pulled the front of my t-shirt way out and piled everything from inside my desk on it and carried it away. "I'll be back," I said over my shoulder to everyone, because everyone was still staring at me and looking scared. "I will," and I was crying as I walked away, and I couldn't see with the tears in my eyes, and my stupid ankle hurt, and I hit the edge of the door with my shoulder, and it gave me a Charlie horse. I let go of one side of my t-shirt, and my stuff fell all over the floor. I turned to look at Mrs. Maxey, and she was just biting her lip, and I thought I could tell if she was really wanting me to stay. She knew I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Our eyes met, and I said, "I'm a good kid. I just got dud meds." She winced, then turned her eyes toward the class and said, "Now I want everyone to settle down. Take a deep breath, let it out slowly, and prepare to do some math drills." "Math drills are one of my strengths," I shouted. But by then Mrs. Jarzab had picked up all my stuff and grabbed my hand like it too was a piece of my stuff and led me down the hall toward the office. And that's the end of chapter 7. We'll have to wait and see what happens to poor little Joey.